Welcome to Weather and Climate Chat, Friday, September 11th, 2020. And before we start the show, we just wanted to, of course, say the words "never forget." 19 years ago, around this time, the world changed forever. So we, of course, remember that moment and never forget it. Welcome to Weather and Climate Chat. I am your host, Monsoon Mike, and with me I have Dr. Michael Davis, our campus meteorologist. Dr. Davis, how are you today?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Okay. Well, we have a lot to talk about. We just talked about that off the air as we were preparing, and we have so much to talk about now with past, present, future weather and several climate topics. So without further ado, we're going to get right into it. Before I do, wanted to just ask, how your semester is going. Of course, a lot of us have been doing work remotely in these times. I assume your students are and yourself are well for now.
Yeah, for now we're doing okay, but students have been going in quarantine.
Right. So we hope.
So I'm dealing with the best I can,
as we all are. So we hope everybody's health stays good. And everybody continues to follow the rules of keeping everybody safe. So we've got a lot to talk about, past, present, and future weather. So I guess we'll get right into some of the stuff going on right now. We're recording this, as I said, on Friday, September 11th. And the biggest thing I'm noticing, Dr. Davis, is after a couple of very humid, muggy days, those dew points are coming down outside. Right now I'm looking at a dew point of 64, which is a great improvement over yesterday's 74 around this time. And we had a cold front that moved through last night and has contributed to much nicer weather today. And tomorrow is looking pretty nice as well, with the National Weather Service calling for mostly sunny skies, high of 73 degrees. It's so far, our meteorological autumn has been fairly average. We started off kind of seasonably cool. We got into, unfortunately, a muggy, sticky pattern once again, and now we've kind of cooled off a little bit again. And it looks like the roller coaster continues for a couple of days as we get into I'm sharing my screen right here. That cold front that moved through last night is progged to move back north as a warm front somewhere around Sunday. So Sunday we'll see our dew points spike again temporarily, but then cold front comes through behind that, and next week it looks like we get into a really nice pattern, Dr. Davis, of some really nice fall-like air.
Yeah, really strong high pressure coming down from Canada on Monday, and should be pretty much over our area for Monday all the way to Friday, if not in the early part of Saturday.
This is my favorite part, Dr. Davis, because you know how I love fall and how I hate humidity. I'm looking at the dew point forecast, and of course right now we're in the 60s. Over the weekend, tomorrow we'll be in the 40s and low 50s, which is super. Sunday, unfortunately, we spike again behind that warm front. You see we're back up near 70. But this is the part I'm loving, Dr. Davis. Look at dew points around next Tuesday, 47. That is some really nice dry air. I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, the dry air is going to be infiltrating a lot into next week. And even into today, too. I believe the dew point should be in the upper 50s almost.
Yeah, well, right now we're 64 at the Reading Airport. I just looked, but it looks like by tonight at 8 o'clock will be, according to this dew point predictor, will be around 57, which will be nice. And then overnight, around 2 a.m., we dropped to around 48. So that's some really nice air for tonight, tomorrow. Not so nice on Sunday behind that warm front, but fortunately there's a cold front hot on its heels, and then we're back to the really nice air next week. So look at Tuesday's forecast from the National Weather Service. We're talking sunny with a high of 71, so we might be hard-pressed to get out of the 60s on Tuesday. Mixed with dew points in the 40s, Tuesday's going to feel downright autumn-like, so I'm definitely looking forward to that, Dr. Davis.
Yes, we're seeing the first tastes of fall maybe a week or so early from astronomical autumn.
I'm not complaining.
Unlike what happened out in the West.
Yeah, unfortunately.
They just skipped fall.
Yeah, we'll talk about that shortly. And then most of next week looks like it stays pretty nice. Temperatures in the 70s, which is fairly average for this time of year. Nights in the 40s and 50s. Don't really see any huge spikes in temperature one way or the other. Looks like we do warm up a little bit toward the end of next week, but maybe another cold front somewhere around next weekend. So fairly seasonal pattern. And if you look at the Climate Prediction Center 6 to 10 day and 8 to 14 day, I like this as well. I'm used to seeing lots of reds over our area, but 6 to 10, we've got a nice normal over our area. And 8 to 14 day, even a little on the cooler than average side over the area. So, heck, we might finish September actually nice for a change.
The average high right about now is upper 70s, like 77, 78, somewhere in that ballpark. And then average low is, I think, around upper 50s, low 60s.
Correct. So pretty nice fall air. I'm definitely looking forward to that. Don't get too excited, though, fall lovers, because the 3-month outlook still has us as above normal fall temperature-wise. So, whatever. We're used to it.
Yeah, we can get big swings.
We're going to get swings, and we're just going to have to deal with that. But for the next at least week or two, some pretty nice seasonal air in our neck of the woods. Precipitation-wise, today nice, tomorrow nice. Sunday we'll lean on the cloudier side with that warm front followed by the cool front. But then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, as that one meteorologist that I used to follow used to say, cruise control weather. Set the cruise control and enjoy. Nice.
Yeah, did you also see it? The NAM model on Sunday was starting to
let's take a look.
Line.
Yeah, let's take a look at the NAM. NAM is sometimes good for stuff to show that like squalls and such. Well, the new one is not that far out yet, so I'll have to go to the older one. Sunday kind of breaks it up before it gets to our area. Now, that could be, we don't know if that's true or not, but it has some gusty storms in western PA, but by the time it gets to over the mountains, it's not much of really anything. But, again, that's subject to change. But there is that possibility for showers and thunderstorms on Sunday.
But most of that activity, at least for our neck of the woods, looks to be afternoon or evening on Sunday rather than
you can pretty much clearly
like morning.
You can pretty much clearly see where that cold front is. The cold front would be like right over like around State College, central Pennsylvania, like around late afternoon, and then kind of passes over our area that night, and then Monday a much nicer day.
So morning might be okay.
Yeah.
Morning.
It's a weakening front. It's not the strongest front in the world, so that's partially the reason for that. Okay, so now that we've talked about that's the current map there. Now that we've talked about some stuff around our neck of the woods, let's talk a little bit about the tropics. We not have 1, but 2, but 3, but 4, but 5, but 6 areas to keep an eye on. 2 named storms and 4 other areas to keep an eye on. So.
Then we have Paulette, we have Renee.
We have Paulette and we have Renee out there. And just so our folks know, we're going to talk about Laura shortly, which was a couple weeks ago, but let's talk about what's currently out there. We have Paulette and Renee that are out there. Basically, as they say in the business, fish storms. Not a whole lot of...
Not so much for Paulette, though.
Well, that's true.
Paulette's going to make landfall in Bermuda.
Yeah, let's talk about... Let me bring up the cone here. There's Paulette's cone. Oh, wow, yeah, there's Bermuda right there. I did not realize that it was going to get that close to Bermuda. She is forecast to be a hurricane at that point.
Yep.
Not a major hurricane, or they usually put a little M there when it's a major hurricane, but a hurricane nonetheless. Right now, at 11 o'clock on Friday, she is 65-mile-an-hour winds. I'm not
right on the cusp of hurricane status.
Yeah. I'm not sure what her exact forecasted winds are when she gets to Bermuda. Is there a map that tells me that her forecasted strength at that point? I don't know.
If you go back.
Yeah.
And then look at the forecast advisory, I believe.
Okay.
It has the times and dates, I think, on there somewhere.
Okay.
Maybe not.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, like
I'm not that familiar with the hurricane centers.
Yeah, I'm not familiar either. I do know, though, that when it's a major hurricane, like a 3 or above, they'll turn that H into an M, so they just have it as an H. So probably about a Category 1, maybe Category 2 storm, Bermuda. It's still pretty major, and it's not that unusual for Bermuda to have a storm. So our thoughts go out to them. Hopefully they fare well. It looks like it'd be around Monday morning would be the key time for interest in Bermuda.
And then Renee's going to stay out in the ocean.
And then Renee, yeah, I apologize. Paulette was not a fish storm. Renee is your proverbial fish storm. She's not really going to.
I do a little loop-de-loop too out.
Yeah, I'm just looking at that. That's kind of funky there. Kind of a little bit around and just kind of floating around out there in the ocean. So not really causing much problems. But
Renee is getting a lot in the way of dry air from the Sahara right now.
Correct. Whoops, I accidentally stopped sharing my screen there. Yeah, so not really that concerned. However, there are 4 other areas of concern out there to keep an eye on. One being in the Gulf of Mexico. Trough of low pressure located over the north-central Gulf of Mexico. Although the associated shower and thunderstorm activity is minimal, some slow development of the system is possible while it moves westward and then southwestward over the northern and western Gulf of Mexico. Got that? Westward and southwestward over the northern and western Gulf of Mexico. That's a mouthful. Formation chance in the next 48 hours and 5 days fairly low. And if the forecasted movement is southwestward, probably not really affecting U.S. interests. So that's good news. And there's something else to watch. This guy's out in the kind of east of Miami. A surface trough of low pressure located over the northwestern Bahamas is producing a large area of disorganized showers and storms that extend from northwestern and central Bahamas eastward a few hundred miles over the western Atlantic. The system is forecast to move westward around 10 miles per hour, crossing the Bahamas and Florida today and tonight, moving into the eastern Gulf on Saturday. Upper-level winds are expected to become conducive for development, and a tropical depression could form while the system moves west-northwestward over the Gulf of Mexico this weekend and early next week. Regardless of development, the storm is expected to produce heavy rainfall over the Bahamas, South Florida. Okay, so heavy rain over South Florida from this blob of convection, and then out to the Gulf of Mexico, and then we potentially could have another named storm to watch in the Gulf of Mexico next week.
Yeah, that bears some watching, at least for southern Florida and into the central Gulf Coast.
Yeah.
I posted my talk on my page the other day, or actually this morning, and talked about interest in the central Gulf Coast. Should be concerned with that. If it does get named, it will be the next named storm is Sally.
Sally. Okay. So we'll keep an eye on that.
But there's a quite vigorous one that's further out toward the West African African coast that bears more concern. That's right there.
Yeah, we got 2 to watch coming off of Africa right now. This one is got like the National Hurricane Center. If you go to their site, they have like a yellow X if it's kind of something to watch, and orange X if it's a little more something to watch, and a red X if it's really something to watch. So they got the red X out there. A tropical wave is located a few hundred miles south of Cabo Verde Islands and is producing a large area of disorganized showers and storms. Development of this system is forecast, and tropical depression expected to form while it moves westward 15 to 20 miles per hour into the eastern and central Atlantic. Chances of formation are quite high over the next 5 days, 90%. So this likely will be another named storm.
And then after Sally, we have Teddy.
Right. So that's something to watch as well. And at this point, forecasting, where it goes is almost impossible. We'll just have to watch where that one goes. Anyone in the U.S. should keep an eye on that.
Yeah, the spaghetti models for that one have it pretty much any direction in the Atlantic right now.
Yeah. So that's fair game. Anybody's fair game on that one. And then just for good measure, fortunately, this one's a yellow X, so only a 10% chance, but
it jumps up to 40.
Yeah, just goes to show what a wild year this is. Another area of disturbed weather associated with tropical waves beginning to move off West Africa. Environmental conditions appear conducive for development, and a tropical depression could form. Don't mean to laugh there, but if a tropical depression forms, and then what comes after that, a tropical storm, we could have yet another named storm, which would be
Vicky.
I guess we skipped past you because there's not that many U names.
Not many U names, yeah.
So, wow.
And then after Vicky is Wilfred. And then after that, we'll go Greek letters. In 2005.
Wow. So we might be at this rate, we might be into the Greek letters by the end of September if we keep going at this rate, which, by the way, yesterday.
By the end of next week, potentially.
Right, yeah. Well, right, at this rate.
If all these develop.
Yeah. Also, I should mention, Dr. Davis, yesterday, September 10th, was the official peak of hurricane season.
That's right.
Right on cue, peak of hurricane season. Here we are with 6 things to watch out in there. So.
The late hurricane forecaster Bill Gray would always have a bell, and he would ceremonially ring the bell on September 10th for the height of hurricane season.
So here we are. We just finally crossed halfway, and we were already like almost through our alphabet. So
that's right.
2020 never ceases to amaze, does it? So that's the tropics. So moving on from the tropics, now we're going to talk about some other interesting things that have happened around the U.S., and we'll get to the wildfires in a minute. I don't even have to talk about that.
Do you want to get to Laura before we go there?
Oh, yeah. I almost forgot about. Thank you, Dr. Davis. Thank you. And I'm going to get on my little soapbox here. I try to stay off my soapbox when I record this, but I'm just going to get on a little non-political soapbox, just a little jab at the media in general. Laura caused catastrophic devastation over portions of southwestern Louisiana.
She was stronger than Katrina at landfall.
Mm-hmm. Katrina got a lot of press because it was in a highly populated area, but still, I mean, the damage pictures coming out of southwestern Louisiana from Laura a couple weeks ago look very similar to Andrew in 1992, where it looks like somebody just went through with a bulldozer.
Absolutely.
Just totally flattened the area. Here's my soapbox. That got all of about maybe a couple hours of news coverage the day after it happened, and we haven't heard a peep since. And there are people down there still without water, still without power, still some people still missing, lives totally upended, and there's just so much other news in our world going on right now. We're not hearing about it. Laura was a hugely major hurricane.
And it was also roughly 15 years to the day of Katrina making landfall.
Right. So I purposely make an effort to look up stories about Laura almost every other day just to see how they're doing down there. And they're not doing too good. I mean, there's still water shortages, the whole 9 yards. And Laura was a major, almost a Category 5 hurricane.
5 miles off, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. And
which I think Michael was a Cat 4 at landfall, but then the Hurricane Center went back and changed it to a Cat 5.
Right.
And I don't know if they're going to do something similar with Laura as well.
Yeah, we could find out maybe through later studies that she really was a Cat 5 when she crossed. But I mean, once you get that severe, it doesn't really matter at that point because the damage is just horrible. So yeah, that's just my little soapbox there. I mean, we're so caught up with all the other stories. Not to say the other stories aren't important, but stories that 25 years ago would have been huge, like a hurricane that did that kind of damage, really are not getting much coverage at all this year because there's just so much other stuff happening.
Yeah, and I think it also is a broader picture of how the media views the environment in general, because if you look at the major television networks right now, there's very little time that's actually given to environmental concerns or climate change.
Yep.
So I feel like this is just another factor into that dearth of coverage.
We've just got so immune to all these wild climate shifts that we're kind of immune to it almost. We don't,
And that is terrifying.
That is not good at all. No. Something else wild that happened in this past week, Denver. Let's talk a little bit about Denver. I was going to say Memorial Day, yeah. Labor Day, Monday afternoon in Denver, temperatures were in the 90s. The very next day, it was snowing in Denver.
And it was above 100 on Sunday, if I'm not mistaken, in Denver.
So Denver's temperature dropped a record 64 degrees in 24 hours between Monday and Tuesday. I don't know what to say about that, Dr. Davis. I mean, it's not that unusual for that part of the country, but that still was pretty extreme. I believe that was like the most extreme drop this time of year. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, it was quite remarkable and impressive about what happened out there. The record change from 100 degrees to accumulating snowfall was 5 days in the U.S., and that was set in Rapid City, South Dakota. I forget the year, but with this past plunge of really cold air that then gave the snowfall to the area, Rapid City again set that with 3 days between 100 degrees and accumulating snow. And then Denver did 100 degrees to accumulating snow in 2 days. And this is all due to the waviness of the jet stream, which is brought about by changes in temperature and changes in circulation patterns. So we're going to get these big swings from extremes. And that's what we've been observing in the atmosphere. But you can't really link this to climate change per se, because you have to remember that this is weather. This is not climate.
And you and I always say, Dr. Davison, and we're always sensitive about that you can't really link one event to climate change. But if you start seeing a pattern of like maybe multiple events like this happening, then
Yes.
maybe you can make a link. Seeing these kind of things continuously happen in such a short amount of time, that's a little concerning. Would you agree with that, Dr. Davis?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
If you start seeing these trends occurring more frequently, this is not part of a natural swing.
Exactly. Okay. Something else that's also, it's just like we're going from one bad thing to
We have a laundry list.
Oh, God, I'm getting tired. Something else that's also not natural is this, Dr. Davis, and this is just absolutely horrifying what's going on in the West Coast. California, Oregon, Washington.
Idaho.
Historic wildfires. Talk about it, Dr. Davis. I'm not sure what to say.
So what we have is pretty much a giant tinderbox out in the western U.S., and it's been building for years after years of drought, and also the infestation of bark beetles out in the west that have been decimating the pine trees and others out in that particular area. So when they die out and when there's dry conditions, they are going to be pretty much like matchsticks when they get lit up. And we've been seeing very widespread, more so than usual, wildfires going through the western U.S. right now. I believe somewhere in, was it California, that they had about typically, I think like 200,000 acres that were burned by this time of year. And now we're about 1.5 million acres.
Wow.
So it's been
and it's not
record.
just California, it's also Oregon and Washington as well.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
In fact, there's a map on the New York Times that just lists, they actually have a tracking map of all the wildfires. It's giving me a hard time because it wants me to be a subscriber. I'll have to activate that. But
yeah, there's like the Holiday Farm fire right now. There's something complex fire. I forget what that one name is.
Look at this picture that we're looking at right here. I mean, our listeners can't see it. But
Yeah, you have communities that are being wiped out off the map in hours.
I mean,
and there's also another one that's bearing down on Paradise, the same town that had the campfire a few years ago.
Right. I mean, I'm looking at this one picture on here. Our listeners can't see it, but it looks like something out of a freaky sci-fi movie. The town of Berry Creek, California. It's all you see is just like charred cars and trees.
And the other thing, too, was this happened during that Arctic plunge that occurred in the west, and you had some incredibly strong winds that were being generated by that change in temperature. Some parts of Utah were 90, 100-mile-per-hour wind gusts, and that just fanned the flames, and you could actually see on satellite image the smoke fanning out from very strong winds that were being generated.
I'm just looking at some of these pictures. It's absolutely amazing.
And you've also been getting those really eerie orange skies out in the west.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of photos recently of San Francisco, like the Golden Gate Bridge,
there,
as we've seen there, being in this orange light. And that's because when you start burning a large amount of wildfire, you're going to have that particulate matter go into the atmosphere, and that size of particle is larger than visible light, so it's going to scatter the longer wavelengths, the reds, more efficiently than, say, our normal atmosphere molecules, which are smaller than visible wavelengths, so they scatter the shorter ones, like blue. So the sky becomes that orange-red color. It's fairly similar to what happens, a similar process with sunrise and sunset. And even out here in the eastern U.S., we're getting some of the smoke from those fires. And we've been getting some very vivid sunrises and sunsets as a result because of the higher particulate matter that is in the atmosphere.
Interesting.
If you look at the smoke image of how the smoke is moving across the United States, it is rather remarkable how much of this country is covered with that smoke from the wildfires right now.
Wow. So talking about climate change once again, we said we couldn't just focus on one thing and blame climate change. But this, however, this is more than one thing. This is multiple fires, devastating fires that we've never seen.
This has been a culmination of several different factors that have been going into this disaster. Like I said, with the years of drought, the bark beetles, and you also have to consider development, people moving into areas that may not have burned recently or putting themselves in greater harm's way.
Right.
And then you have these towns that get burned down as a result. And you had recently Kamala Harris saying something like, oh, our hearts go out to what's happening in California, because she being from California herself. But they stopped short of saying it was climate change.
Yeah.
So if you are trying to appeal to the climate change voter, you need to come out and say this is climate change, because the elements that we've been seeing with climate change are all over this particular disaster. And this wildfire risk could have been averted by better practices and better ways of addressing our environmental causes.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it any better myself, Dr. Davis. It's scary. It really is scary.
And the other thing, too, is the sky is orange. The sky is not blue, and yet we still have debate about whether climate change is real and that we can't afford a Green New Deal.
That's a good point.
And we're seeing the entire western U.S. being covered in smoke with these orange skies that are not normal.
Mm-hmm.
And we're still having this quote-unquote debate. How much longer is it going to take for it to sink in?
Or as I always like to say, Dr. Davis, you've heard me say this a million times, we argue about all these other issues out there that politicians love to argue about. Social Security, abortion, the death penalty, food stamps, whatever. And don't get me wrong, they're all important issues that need to be debated. But none of those issues, we're not going to be on this planet to discuss any of those issues if we don't have a planet to live on. And if we keep having things like this happening, all of that's going to be moot.
And, okay, then we have all these wildfires. Let's give them money for relief and rebuilding.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next year, not even the next year, we get something on the same level as this, if not worse.
Mm-hmm.
Then what do we do? Mm-hmm. Throw more money at it.
Yep.
Are we just going to be destined to bleed financially by giving more and more money to more fierce storms and disasters? Or do we want to invest in ourselves and utilize our potential technologies, innovation, and other resources at our disposal to become more resilient and increase the robustness of the U.S. economy and actually have a payoff, an investment of that money that will then give it back to the economy.
Yep. Good point.
But evidently, we just want to spend more and more money year after year as these disasters keep getting worse and worse. And in fact, there was an article that came out a few years ago saying that if climate change is not addressed by the year 2050 or 2070, somewhere around there, 1 out of every $4 of the U.S. GDP will be going to offsetting climate change disasters.
Wow.
So that is putting your economy, 25% of the U.S. total economic output, going toward trying to stop climate change, which will already have decimated the planet by then.
Right. So we keep we keep throwing Band-Aids on situations instead of
putting the Band-Aids on the dam, and the dam's about to break.
Good one. Good analogy right there. But one more thing I did want to cover before we end, because we've gone very long here, but I mean, it's all good stuff we're talking about. This is something you educated me on. The Commodity Futures Trading Commission on Wednesday released a report citing climate change as a major risk to the financial markets. The report received substantial media attention, but a spokesman for the CFTC chairman, Heath Tarbert, pointed out in an email that the report is a project of Commissioner Rustin Benham's alone. Benham is a Democrat commissioner and Tarbert's a Republican. Okay, so of course the Republican is
bipartisan.
Yeah, of course he's saying that it's a partisan issue, and he's just picking on that because it's for politics. But that's an interesting report right there. The Commodity Futures Trading Commission releasing a report citing climate change as a major risk to the financial markets.
So essentially what this is the Commodity Futures Trading Commission is the branch of the government that sets price futures for commodities like wheat, oil, those sorts of things. And they came out with a report yesterday saying that the climate change threatens those commodity futures and the markets, very similar to what COVID and the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis had as well.
Right.
And if you don't start factoring in the effects of climate change onto the economic futures market, you're going to have a very similar situation to what we saw earlier this year with COVID tanking the economy, and we had with 2008 the subprime mortgage issue. And who knows, this could even be worse because of climate change having a much broader impact on multiple facets of the U.S. economy and way of life.
Right.
And what's interesting about this is the first report that really linked climate change to economic output, at least for the futures. There have been studies that have been done previously, but this is the first one that really linked it to it. And it's also interesting because this came out from the Trump administration, and our current administration has been downplaying the risks of climate change for years and has been continually rolling back environmental regulations in order to promote economic growth.
Right. Right.
So it's very disheartening to hear that you're going to have to put these safeguards in place to prevent our economy from tanking or taking a very severe hit from inaction of climate change, which ultimately that's the path we're choosing right now in Washington, because there's absolutely no traction on the Green New Deal or any real solid, effective environmental policy. And we all see this coming, except the politicians.
Right. Well, one thing that people can do, and we've talked about this before, and I don't mean to turn this political, is, one candidate, one major candidate is, we know where he stands on climate change. He thinks it's a joke. He thinks it's a Chinese hoax, etc. The other one is lukewarm at best. However, there's some hope that we can, keep pushing him in the right direction, and he has improved his stance. on things and said that it is an emergency that we've got to deal with. So neither candidate are perfect, but one obviously is much better than the other. So remember this when you go to the ballot box on November 3rd and vote thinking of climate, because if we don't have a livable planet, like I always say, none of these other issues mean anything.
I would tend to agree with that. You have to vote.
Yep.
And vote for the candidate that is going to ensure our posterity on the planet.
Right. And like I said, we're not naive. I'm not even mentioning names, but I think everybody knows where we're going with this. He's not perfect, but there's hope. At least there's some hope with that administration versus the current administration, where I don't see a whole lot of hope at all, really. So remember that. Remember that in November. Well, I think we went the longest we've ever recorded a weather and climate chat. We might have just like Denver broke a record for the biggest temperature drop. I think Davis and Monsoon Mike broke a record for the longest weather and climate chat.
Like almost half hour.
Yeah, I think a little more than a half hour, actually. But that's okay. Anybody that sat through this entire thing, thank you for being a loyal fan, and share it with anybody that you think would like to hear it, because we had discussed a lot of important things. Dr. Davis, stay healthy.
Me too.
I'll try. And we'll try to reconvene in another week or so. How's that sound?
Sounds good to me.